everyone. Welcome to Dead Time Stories. I know many of you enjoy listening to these videos as you fall asleep. So before you drift off, I'd love for you to leave a comment letting me know where in the world you're tuning in from. And if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe. All right, now let's get comfortable, relax, and dive into tonight's story.
The rain started suddenly, and it was unlike any you'd driven through before. Thick, heavy sheets blurring the windshield, as if the sky itself was falling. Your wipers screeched across the glass like they were protesting, struggling to keep up. Branches clawed at the sides of the rental car as you rolled deeper into the forest, headlights bouncing off wet bark and patches of slick moss. You checked your phone again. Still no signal. The bars had vanished 30 minutes ago, right after you'd taken what you thought was a shortcut. The GPS had flickered, frozen, then gone black entirely. You'd laughed nervously at first. Just your luck. But the humor faded quickly. Now the road beneath your tires had narrowed to barely more than a trail, pocked with mud, gravel, and deep ruts. You hadn't passed another car in over an hour. The deeper you went, the more the woods seemed to close in, pressing against the car, the trees leaning just a little too far over the road. You weren't even sure what made you keep going. Something more than stubbornness. Something subtle, like gravity, pulling you forward. And then you saw it. Through the trees, just past a clearing. Light. A house, standing alone at the end of a narrow gravel drive. The porch lamp was lit, flickering slightly in the rain. Smoke rose from the chimney in a slow, lazy curl. You eased off the gas and stared, hands clenched tight around the steering wheel. There was no other sign of life, no other houses, no lights in the distance. Just this one place, unexpected, incongruous, like it had been dropped here from a different time. You pulled in. The gravel crunched beneath your tires, muffled by the rain. You parked near the porch, engine idling, your breath misting faintly in the cold air. For a moment you just sat there, staring through the windshield. The house was tall, 3 stories, colonial in style, but weathered by years of neglect. The paint had faded to a grayish hue, and ivy crawled up one side like a slow infection. The windows were tall and narrow, shuttered but not sealed, and even though the storm raged around it, the house stood perfectly still. Too still. You stepped out of the car. Rain soaked your coat instantly. You jogged up the porch steps, boots slapping against the wood. The front door loomed, a heavy oak slab with an iron handle and an old brass knocker shaped like a raven's head. You reached for it and froze. The door creaked open on its own. Just an inch. Just enough to show you the warm glow inside. Firelight flickered from somewhere deeper in the house. You hesitated, heart thudding, but then stepped in. The door closed behind you with a gentle click. Inside, it was warm, too warm. A soft fire glowed in the hearth down the hallway. Rugs muffled your footsteps. The air smelled of lavender, cedarwood, and something faintly metallic just beneath the surface. "Hello?" you called, voice uncertain. No answer. The house didn't feel abandoned. It felt expectant. You stepped forward. The firelight drew you down the hall. The parlor was like a memory you didn't know you had. A brick fireplace nestled in the far wall, flames licking gently at aged logs, casting gold light across polished wooden floors. 2 wingback chairs sat angled toward the fire, upholstered in fabric faded with time. A small tea table sat between them, upon which rested a closed book and a single porcelain teacup, still steaming. You stared at the cup. It hadn't been left long ago. The heat had not yet dissipated. Someone had just been here. "Hello?" you called again, softer this time. The house didn't reply, but something about the silence felt thick, not empty, more like someone was listening just out of view. You waited a moment longer, half expecting someone to step from behind the corner or descend the stairs and greet you. No one came. You were about to back out, to leave, when you noticed a key hanging beside the hallway mirror. Old, iron, worn smooth in the middle as if it had been touched by generations. Without thinking, you took it. It was cold. Colder than it should have been, like it had been sitting in a shadow all its life. You slipped it into your coat pocket and wandered back toward the stairwell. The walls bore faded wallpaper, a vine and flower motif almost hidden beneath age. Portrait frames lined the hallway, but they were empty, just cracked glass and blank beige backing where faces should have been. As you placed your foot on the first step, the grandfather clock at the end of the hall began to chime. 3 times. You hadn't noticed the time. You hadn't realized how dark it had become. You climbed the stairs. The second floor greeted you with a low sigh, the kind of sound only old houses made, where the wood shifts like it's settling into a familiar shape. The wallpaper continued here, curling in corners, interrupted only by narrow doors on either side. Most were closed, except one. The room on the left had its door ajar, a soft orange flicker spilling out across the hallway floor. You approached it slowly, hand grazing the rail, heart ticking faster for no reason you could name. Inside was a bedroom, and it was waiting. The fire burned gently in the hearth, brighter than the one below. Heavy drapes hung at the windows, drawn closed. A tall wardrobe stood in the corner, its mirrored door veiled by a curtain tied to one side. An armchair with a patchwork throw faced the fire. The bed was made, sheets crisp, blankets folded just so, like someone had taken care, like they knew you were coming. Your suitcase wasn't with you. You didn't remember carrying it in. And yet, there it was, placed neatly at the foot of the bed, as if it had been waiting here all along. Your throat felt dry. You rubbed your hands together. This is a dream. I must be dreaming. The house, for a moment, seemed to agree. Then came the noise. Faint, muffled, directly above you. Footsteps. Just one step. Then 2. Slow, deliberate. In a room that, if your understanding of the layout was correct, should not exist. You stood perfectly still, eyes drawn to the ceiling overhead, listening. The footsteps, if that's what they were, had stopped. Only the faint crackle of the fire filled the silence now. But something about the sound, or the absence of it, felt deliberate. Like whatever had moved up there wanted you to know it had moved, but didn't care to be found. You crossed the room slowly, glancing toward the ceiling again, then to the tall wardrobe in the corner. A thin layer of dust lined its upper shelf, undisturbed. A row of heavy wool coats hung inside. At the very back, something metallic glinted faintly, an old wire hanger twisted into an unfamiliar shape. You shut the door gently. The firelight danced across the wooden floor, flickering against the walls as if it were unsettled too. You turned to the bed. That strange sensation returned, of being remembered. The sheets were soft flannel. The quilt, hand-stitched with faded patterns, felt oddly familiar. You sat at the edge of the bed and ran your hand over the blanket. Warm. Not just from the fire, warm from within. Like someone had been lying there just moments ago. You didn't mean to lie down, but the weight of the day, the storm, the silence of the house, all of it pressed against your shoulders. Your limbs moved without argument. The pillow accepted your head like it had done so before. As your eyes drifted shut, the sound returned. This time, it came from the closet. A soft scratching, faint, deliberate, like something dull being drawn along the inside of the door. Your breath hitched. You waited. The scratching stopped. Then came the whisper. Faint, soft, so quiet you weren't sure it was real. But it said your name. Your eyes snapped open. Silence again. The closet door was shut, unmoved. The fire crackled innocently. You sat up slowly, breath shallow, waiting for your heart to steady, but it didn't. The room hadn't changed, yet something had. The air was thicker, heavier, like it had settled wrong in your lungs. You rose and crossed to the closet, placed your hand on the knob. Cold, much colder than the rest of the room. You hesitated, heart thudding, and opened it. Nothing. Just the quilted robes, the dusty slippers, the warped floorboards. No one inside, no scratch marks, no signs of anything living or dead. Still, you felt watched. You shut the closet door and turned toward the hallway. That's when you saw him. A figure stood at the far end of the second-floor corridor. A man, tall, thin, dressed in dark clothing, arms at his sides. His face, you couldn't quite make it out, not because of shadow, he simply didn't seem to have one. A blur where features should have been, like an old photo left in the rain. He didn't move, not toward you, not away, just stood, watching, or something like it. You opened your mouth to speak, but the lights flickered, and he was gone.
You stood frozen in the doorway, staring at the empty hallway. No sound, no movement, just the flickering gaslight sconces along the wall, gently swaying in a breeze you could not feel. The man, if he had been a man, was gone. Your hand trembled as you gripped the frame of the doorway. Goosebumps rose on your arms, the kind that had nothing to do with temperature. You weren't sure how long you stood there, how long your breath stayed caught in your throat. Eventually, your feet moved. You stepped out into the hallway, eyes scanning every inch of wood and shadow. The rug beneath your feet was floral, worn down at the edges, as if many had walked this way before. The sconce light pooled weakly along the hall, never quite reaching the corners. You turned slowly, checking each door along the corridor. All were shut. You tried the nearest one, expecting it to be locked, but it opened easily. Inside, darkness. You reached for the light switch. It clicked. Nothing.
The room was small, what might have once been a nursery. A rocking chair sat near a window with broken panes, its cushion torn and flattened. A mobile hung from the ceiling above a crib, slowly spinning, though you hadn't touched it. Tiny yellowed sheep drifted in slow circles above the cradle. Something about the room felt wrong in a different way. Not dangerous, not threatening, just forgotten. You stepped back and quietly closed the door. At the end of the hallway stood one last door, taller than the rest, narrower too. You didn't remember seeing it earlier, not when you first arrived. It had a brass handle, dulled with age, and a keyhole larger than necessary. Carved into the wood above the frame was a small symbol, a circle split into 4 uneven pieces. Your hand slipped into your pocket before you even realized what you were doing. The key, the heavy iron key from the hallway hook. You held it up. The teeth were jagged, the shaft long and old. It looked like it might break the moment you turned it. You stared at the lock. Every part of you screamed not to use it, but your fingers moved on their own. You placed the key into the slot. It fit perfectly. You felt the mechanism click, ancient gears grinding into reluctant motion. The door didn't open. Not yet. But you heard something on the other side. Breathing. Deep, wet, like something sleeping against the wood. You yanked the key free and backed away. You didn't open that door. Not tonight.
You retreated to your bedroom, footsteps soft against the floorboards, half expecting the locked door behind you to swing open, but it didn't. The air in the hallway stayed unnaturally still, like the house was waiting for you to make the next move. Back inside, the fire had nearly gone out. Strange, since it had been so lively just moments before. Only the last embers remained, pulsing like slow, dying heartbeats. You didn't undress. You didn't brush your teeth or change into sleepwear. You simply lay on top of the bed, shoes and all, staring at the ceiling where the footsteps had once echoed. Sleep didn't come easily. It arrived in fragments, the way mist gathers in the woods, creeping, uncertain. You slipped in and out of it, your thoughts drifting like leaves in a stream. Just as you'd begin to fall, you would hear something. A door creaking open in the hallway. A child's laugh, barely audible. The clinking of porcelain. Once, very faintly, the sound of someone whispering in another language just outside the bedroom wall. And underneath it all, the breathing, steady, low, like it lived in the bones of the house. You awoke suddenly. The fire was out, the room cold, shadows long and unfamiliar, and the door to the hallway was open. You were sure, absolutely sure you'd shut it. You sat up slowly, your muscles tight from sleep that hadn't really been rest. The hallway beyond your door stretched in both directions, too dark now to see clearly. The sconces extinguished. Only a pale glow came from downstairs, where the fireplace in the parlor must have still been burning. You crossed the threshold, every instinct telling you to turn back, to lock yourself in. But something tugged at your chest, a quiet insistence that you weren't finished. Halfway down the hall, you heard the stair creak. Someone was descending. You pressed yourself into the wall, heart hammering. From around the bend, a figure emerged. A woman. She wore a long nightdress, the hem whispering across the floor.
Her hair was loose, long and gray with age, or maybe just washed out by the moonlight. Her back was to you as she descended, her steps graceful and unhurried. "Ma'am," you whispered, your voice catching. She paused on the stair. Her head turned, just slightly, but not enough to see her face. Then, without speaking, she continued downward, vanishing into the parlor. You waited. You followed.
The staircase groaned beneath your weight, not in protest, but in recognition. Each step seemed to exhale softly as your foot landed, as if it remembered every soul that had walked here before. At the bottom, the parlor glowed dimly. The woman was gone. The rocking chair by the fire was still. The teacup on the table was empty now, the rim faintly smeared with a trace of lipstick you didn't remember seeing before. The fire burned lower than before, a red-orange glow like the inside of a dying star. And yet, the air was warmer than it should have been. You circled the room carefully, scanning every corner. No doors had opened, no windows let in air, but the curtains swayed slightly, like stirred by someone's passing. Something caught your eye. On the mantel above the fireplace sat a photograph. You could have sworn it wasn't there when you arrived. The frame was brass, ornate and old, but the photo inside was crisp. A black and white image of the parlor. This very room, but different. Cleaner, brighter. The rug newer. The walls free of cracks. In the photograph stood a family. A man in a three-piece suit, a woman in a high-collared dress, and a child between them. The woman looked familiar. You leaned in. The face was yours. You staggered back, heart racing, pulse in your ears like thunder. The photo remained, unchanged. That was your face, not a look-alike, not a resemblance. It was you, standing beside strangers in a time that wasn't yours. You reached for the frame, but the moment your fingers touched the brass, the fire hissed. A sudden gust swept through the parlor. The flames flared upward, white-hot for just a moment, then collapsed inward, sucking the warmth from the room. The photograph was gone. In its place, an empty frame. And then you heard it again. Footsteps, upstairs. But this time, they were running. You backed away from the hearth, the room darker now than before, shadows thickening at the edges. Something moved in the mirror above the mantel. Not your reflection. Another face, pale, eyes black as soot, watching you from the other side of the glass. You turned, but there was no one behind you. A low moan sounded from the hallway. You couldn't tell if it came from a person or from the house itself.
You backed away from the mantel, heart pounding. The mirror loomed above the fireplace, framed in dark oak, carved with delicate ivy, elegant, precise, too intricate for its age. The face that had stared at you was gone now, replaced only with your own reflection, wide-eyed, pale, trembling. But something about it was off. You raised your hand. Your reflection did the same. But a moment too late, you froze. You waved your hand again, more quickly this time. The image followed, but sluggishly, like it were watching you through a layer of water. You stepped closer, squinting. For just a second, you caught it again. A second face, behind your own, watching from over your shoulder, faint as breath on glass. A woman's face, eyes dull, mouth slack. Then gone. The mirror returned to normal. You turned quickly to look behind you. Nothing. Still, the hairs on your arms stood upright. Your breath clouded in the air. The house was growing colder. You whispered to no one, "What do you want from me?" The flames answered, popping loudly in the hearth. And somewhere upstairs, something replied. 3 knocks. Measured, hollow, from behind a closed door. You left the parlor and crept up the stairs again, each step seeming steeper than before, the railing colder to the touch. The hallway was darker now, almost smoky, though there was no scent of fire. You approached the door at the far end of the corridor, not the one with the strange keyhole, the one beside it. It had been closed before. Now it was cracked open just enough for a sliver of black to peek through. You pushed it open. A thin film of dust blanketed everything: shelves, lamps, an old writing desk near the window. A 4-poster bed stood against the far wall, its curtains drawn, like someone meant to preserve something behind them. A dressing table bore a cracked mirror and a silver hairbrush still holding long strands of black hair. You stepped inside slowly, not wanting to disturb the stillness. But it was already disturbed. The air rippled. Not wind, not breath, movement. From within the curtains around the bed, you took 1 step closer. The air changed. It smelled of soil and mold and something sweet, rotting fruit. You reached out and drew back the curtain. The bed was empty, but the sheets were still warm.
You reached out slowly and touched the sheets. They were warm, undeniably warm. Not the kind of warmth that lingered after sunlight or fire, but the kind made by flesh, recent, heavy with the imprint of a body no longer there. Your fingers brushed an indentation in the mattress. Oval, human, still deep enough to hold shape. You stepped back instinctively. That's when you heard a sound. Not from the bed, from beneath it. A low, damp breath, followed by a faint dragging sound, something shifting against the wooden floorboards. Your mouth went dry. You lowered yourself slowly, dread pressing down on you like the air before a thunderclap. You peered beneath the bed. At first, only darkness. Then, movement. 2 eyes, wide and unblinking, caught the faintest light. They stared back at you, unblinking, too round, too still. Then, a smile. Too large, too quiet. You stumbled back, hitting the vanity, the mirror above it cracking with the force of your fall. You gasped, clutching the edge of the table. When you looked back under the bed, the eyes were gone. The room was still again, but you weren't alone. You backed out of the room, your breath shallow, your thoughts swirling. You didn't understand what was happening. Was this a dream? A hallucination brought on by exhaustion? But the sensations were too vivid. The chill in the air, the breath of something inches from your skin, the memories in the house that seemed to recognize you. You needed answers. In the hallway, you spotted something new. A door at the far end, previously closed, was now ajar. Not the one with the split circle symbol,
This was a smaller room, likely a study. Inside, bookshelves lined the walls, sagging under the weight of old tomes. Dust danced in shafts of moonlight through cracked blinds. On a desk in the center of the room lay an open ledger. You approached. Its pages were yellowed and brittle, filled with names, handwritten in looping old-fashioned script. No titles, no addresses, just names and dates. Some had notes beside them. Stayed one night. Spoke to the mirror. Left in the morning. Lost in the woods. Tried the locked door. Not seen again. And then, farther down the page, your name. Already written. No date. No note. Just your name, neatly inked in the same script. You had never signed it.
You stared at the page, your name stark and black in the yellow paper, as if etched not in ink but in permanence. You didn't remember writing it. You couldn't have, but it was your handwriting, exactly. The slope of your letters, the curling tail on the Y, the slight slant to the left. You touched the page. It was still damp. Behind you, something shifted. You turned quickly, expecting to see a shadow slipping out the door. But the room was empty, except now, on the corner of the desk, sat a folded piece of parchment that hadn't been there before. You reached for it, your fingers trembling slightly. Unfolded, the note read, "The house remembers all who enter. The door will open when it is ready. Do not ask it twice." Beneath the message, in faded ink, was a name, Mara Finch, and below that, the title, Housekeeper. You looked around the room again, half expecting someone to be standing behind you now, waiting. But no one came. Only the faint sound of wood creaking overhead. Not footsteps this time. Breathing. Long, steady, from the direction of the locked door. You left the study and returned to the hall. The locked door waited. Taller than the others, narrower too. The split circle symbol above it gleamed faintly in the dark, catching some unseen light. You pulled the key from your pocket. It had grown colder. You weren't sure why you approached again. Every part of you begged to leave it alone. But the note, "The door will open when it is ready," felt like a lure or a warning. You couldn't tell which. You placed the key into the lock. It turned with a heavy, reluctant click. You hesitated. This time, the door opened on its own. Slowly, groaning, the hinges wept rust as the gap widened. Behind it, blackness. The hallway behind you flickered, the sconces dimming. A gust of air poured from the open doorway, cold and sweet, like turned soil and candle wax. You stepped inside. The door closed behind you. At first, you couldn't see anything. The darkness was complete, thick and consuming, like velvet pressed against your eyes. You held your breath, afraid that even the sound of your lungs might stir something waiting in the silence. Then slowly, a light began to bloom. Not from above, from beneath. The floorboards glowed faintly underfoot, as though lit by embers trapped just below the wood. The glow revealed a narrow corridor, carved into stone rather than framed with plaster. The walls here were wet, the air tinged with moss and copper. And yet the key still pulsed in your palm, warm now, as if guiding you. You walked forward, one slow step at a time. As you passed, the walls began to change. Carvings, dozens of them etched into the stone like ancient petroglyphs. Figures with no faces, circles within circles. A house with tall windows and hollow eyes. Beneath one figure was a phrase carved deep into the stone, the words ancient but somehow clear in your mind. We dwell in memory, and memory dwells in us. You whispered it aloud. The floorboards creaked. Beneath you, something had heard. The corridor widened into a small chamber. It wasn't a room so much as a hollow in the earth. Damp roots hung from the ceiling, and shallow puddles ringed the walls. In the center stood a stone table, covered in melted candles, all long extinguished. Symbols ringed the tabletop, painted in ash and something darker. And surrounding it, circling like moths that have forgotten how to land, whispers. So many voices, not shouting, not pleading, just remembering, telling stories to no one. She stayed too long. He opened the mirror and let it in. My name was Elizabeth before the house took it. You clutched your head as the words spiraled, echoing not in your ears, but inside your skull. The key in your hand began to tremble. Then, from behind the stone table, a shape rose. Not quickly, not like a jump scare, but like something old waking from a long sleep. Tall, wrapped in tattered lace, and where a face should have been, only shadow, endless and humming. It lifted a single hand and pointed at you.
You couldn't move. The figure didn't advance, didn't speak. It simply stood behind the table, pointing, its form draped in rotting lace that trailed like unraveling funeral garments. The shadows that obscured its face were not tricks of light. They seemed to consume light, devouring even the faint glow from the floor beneath you. You swallowed hard. "Who are you?" you managed, your voice hoarse, as though the air had thickened in your throat. The figure tilted its head. From the darkness of its face, you heard a sound. Not words, not quite. A breath, or a memory of one. A kind of rustling, like wind through dry leaves. Then came the whisper, not from the figure's mouth, but from the walls themselves, in many voices layered atop one another. You have been here before. You left a part of yourself behind. Now you've come to collect it. You stepped back. The key in your hand pulsed, then burned. You gasped and dropped it. It clattered to the ground, then slid toward the figure's feet as if pulled by invisible thread. The figure lowered its hand. The key vanished. And the whispers grew louder. You turned, trying to escape the rising voices, but the corridor was gone. In its place, a mirror. Tall, framed in tarnished silver. Its surface wavered like water. Your reflection stood within it, but it wasn't you. Not quite. The posture was wrong. The expression a vacant, hollow stare, lips slightly parted like it had forgotten how to breathe. And behind your reflection, shapes moved in the dark. You reached out, slowly, trembling, and touched the glass. Cold. It rippled beneath your fingers. The voices hushed. Then a single voice, clearer than the rest, whispered directly behind your ear. "If you walk through,
You won't come back the same. You turned. Nothing there. Only the cold chamber and the extinguished candles. But the mirror called to you, gently, like a tide pulling at your feet. And within the reflection, your other self began to move, not mirroring you, acting on its own. It raised one hand and placed it against the inside of the glass, directly over your heart. The stone table behind you cracked. Dust fell from the ceiling. You had to decide.
Your breath fogged the mirror, and still your reflection didn't mimic it. Its hand remained over your heart, palm pressed flat against the inside of the glass. Its eyes, your eyes, were fixed on you, unblinking, heavy with an expression you couldn't name. Not fear, not sadness, recognition. You didn't understand how, but you knew. This wasn't the first time. You had stood here before. Your hand rose, as if pulled upward by some invisible string. It hovered, uncertain, before matching the gesture. Glass met glass. Your fingers aligned, and in that moment, the mirror gave way. Not with a crash, not with splintering violence. It yielded, cool and fluid as pond water. You stepped forward. The chill wrapped around you like a shroud. The surface resisted for just a second, like the hesitation before an embrace, then accepted you wholly. You sank inward. There was no weight, no light, just quiet. And then, your foot touched solid ground. You emerged into a bedroom, not your own, but nearly identical. The bed, the wallpaper, the wardrobe in the corner, but everything was reversed, as if you had stepped into the mirror's twin. The fire in the hearth burned with a pale blue flame. A clock on the wall ticked backward. You took one step forward. The door behind you, your entrance, was gone. A soft creak drew your eyes toward the bed. Something lay under the quilt. Not a shape, a person. You circled the bed slowly, each step padded by the thick carpet beneath you. The body under the quilt was still. You reached forward and with trembling fingers lifted the edge of the blanket. You saw your own face, eyes closed, mouth slightly parted, sleeping peacefully. You stumbled backward, heart hammering. From the corner of the room, the wardrobe opened with a click. Inside, a woman stood, her face stitched at the lips. She raised a hand and pointed at the sleeping version of you, and then at herself. Then at the mirror, which was no longer behind you. Only darkness. The woman in the wardrobe didn't move like someone alive. Her gestures were fluid, yes, but in the way old fabric flows when shaken free of dust. Her arms unfolded unnaturally, her joints bending with a quiet stiffness like marionette limbs tugged by threads only she could see. Her lips, sewn shut with black thread, quivered, not from pain, from pressure, as if something within her wanted out. You backed away, glancing again at the bed, at yourself, still asleep, still breathing. You whispered, "Is that me?" The woman tilted her head slowly, then stepped forward. You didn't run, couldn't. There was nowhere to go. She stopped inches from you and reached into her gown. Her hand emerged with something small and silvery, threading needles, glinting like teeth. She reached for your mouth. You jerked back. "No! Wait! Please! What are you—" She paused. Then, for the first time, she opened her sewn lips.
not by undoing the thread, but by tearing them apart. The sound was soft, wet, and her voice, when it came, was like moth wings and rust. This house does not keep guests, it keeps their stories. You left yours unfinished. You were shaking now. I don't understand. What do you mean? I left it. The seamstress didn't reply. Instead, she stepped aside. Behind her, deeper within the wardrobe, was another mirror, framed in roots, cracked at the edges, covered in fingerprints and ash. Within it you saw flashes, a child alone in the forest, a hand reaching for a door that shouldn't open, a man in a hallway, face blurred, whispering your name, your voice, crying, "I don't want to go back." Then darkness again. You turned to the seamstress. Was this my dream? She shook her head slowly. You've been here before. You left to forget. Now you return to remember. Something warm slid down your cheek. Tears, though you hadn't realized you'd started crying. Behind you, your sleeping self stirred in the bed. The mirror pulsed once. The seamstress held out the needle and whispered, "Do you want to stay this time?" The needle in the seamstress's hand gleamed dully in the dim room. She offered it without pressure, without insistence, just an open palm, waiting. Behind you, the sleeping version of yourself shifted slightly, murmuring some word you couldn't quite catch. The blankets rose and fell with breath, your breath. "What happens," you asked slowly, "if I say yes?" The seamstress said nothing. Instead, she turned her wrist, letting the needle fall gently into your open hand. It was heavier than you expected. Cold. Familiar. You stared at it, heart pounding. A needle to sew your lips, to keep your voice from leaking into the walls, to bind your presence into the house. Was that what she had done? Is that why her mouth had been sealed, so her story wouldn't escape? "I don't want to be forgotten," you said aloud. The seamstress nodded once. From the bed came another soft breath. You turned and approached your sleeping form. You reached out. Your fingers hovered over the cheek. The skin was warm, alive. You could slip into it. You could finish what you left. Or you could remain here, as watcher, as memory, as part of the house. The seamstress moved toward the wall, drawing back a curtain you hadn't seen before. Behind it, another door. But this one was made of bone-white wood, carved with names, dozens of them, some scratched out, others fading into the grain. Your name was there, too, written twice, once clear, once blurred, as if forgotten. You ran your fingers over the blurred version. It grew warm beneath your touch. The mirror flickered beside you. For a moment, you saw the parlor again, the fire, the wingback chairs, the teacup on the table. And standing there, the man from before, the faceless one. Only now he had a mouth, no eyes. And he was smiling, wide, expectant. He held something, the iron key. He held it out, arm extended, toward the glass. And though he had no eyes, he was looking at you.
The man in the mirror did not move. His hand remained outstretched, the iron key cradled in his pale palm. You could not see his eyes, but you felt the weight of his gaze, an awful gravity, like being studied by something far older than you'd ever understand. The seamstress stood silently behind you, her lips raw but closed now, as if the act of speaking had exhausted her. You stepped toward the mirror, drawn as though by thread. Your fingers met the surface, not liquid this time, but cool, brittle glass. The man held the key closer. He wanted you to take it. Behind you, the bed creaked. You turned. Your sleeping self had sat up, eyes open, staring directly at you. But they weren't your eyes. They were his, the faceless man's. You recoiled. The mirror rippled. A voice, his voice, echoed from both mouths, yours and his, at once. You can't carry a story unfinished. Either leave it behind or become the ending. The sleeping version of you stood, bare feet touching the cold floor, and it began walking toward you. The air grew thick. The wardrobe door slammed shut. The seamstress backed away into shadow. The mirror glowed faintly now, light crawling across its surface like frost spreading on a window pane. You looked into the face of the other you, the one who had risen from the bed. Its expression was blank, but the mouth kept moving. The voice, his voice, spoke through it. This house needs balance. One stays, one leaves. You looked at the key still extended through the mirror. The man's hand waited. You looked at the needle in your own. If you stayed, you'd forget. Slowly, you'd become part of the house, like her, the seamstress, walking its halls in silence, keeping the doors closed, the mirrors polished. If you took the key, you could leave, but something else would take your place. The other you stepped closer. You could smell the mildew on its skin, the scent of books and dust and time. Its face twitched, one cheek trembling like it hadn't worn a face in years. You raised the needle. You looked into the mirror one last time and decided. The needle trembled in your hand, slick with sweat. You held it between your fingers, hovering at your lips. The act, so simple in motion, so monstrous in intent. To bind your voice, to anchor your story here, to remain a memory stitched into the bones of the house. Behind you, your other self, the echo with your face and his voice, stood still, watching, waiting. The mirror pulsed again. The man inside it extended the key a little farther, as though urging your decision. You looked between them. You could feel time split around you like a fraying thread. Stay, and you would never age, never hunger, never leave. You'd tend to the rooms, keep the secrets, lock the doors behind curious guests. Leave, and the house would find another version of you, or worse, become you. You pressed the needle to your lips, a sharp sting. Blood beaded on your lower lip.
But you didn't so. Instead, slowly, you turned and faced the mirror. Your hand reached through. The moment your fingers touched the key, everything stilled. No sound, no breath, even the candlelight froze. Flames paused in mid-dance. The man's hand was ice. You took the key. As you did, your reflection vanished. The mirror rippled once, then shattered, not into shards, but into pages, thin sheets of memory that fluttered and dissolved in midair, scattering stories into the dark. The other you screamed, not aloud, but in your mind, an echo of something ancient and broken. It lunged toward you, but the seamstress was suddenly between you, her arms open, not in protection, but acceptance. She wrapped the echo in lace and shadow and pulled it into the wardrobe. The door slammed shut behind them with a final hollow thud. Silence returned. You stood alone, the mirror gone, the bed empty. Only the key remained in your hand, warm now, and the door, the one made of bone-white wood, was open.
The bone-white door stood open, its carved names shimmering faintly, pulsing like veins beneath the grain. You stepped toward it slowly, the iron key still clutched in your palm, though it no longer burned or trembled. It was simply there now, a part of you. Beyond the door, a narrow staircase spiraled downward. The walls closed in quickly, draped in damp cloth like funeral shrouds. You descended in silence, the only sound your footsteps against the stone, each one muffled, swallowed by a silence so thick it made your ears ring. And then, faintly, you began to hear it. A heartbeat. Slow, deep, like a drum beneath the floorboards. Not yours, the house's. You reached the bottom. A large arched door stood before you, wood veined with root, hinges of blackened brass. No handle, no keyhole, just a small engraving above the center panel. To leave, you must carry what you came to forget. You touched the door. It opened inward with a long, low groan. Beyond it, light. You stepped out not into the hall, not into the parlor, but into a different version of the house. Familiar and not. The rugs were newer, the wallpaper crisp, the scent of lavender stronger, cleaner. It was the house before it wore down, before memory and grief softened its edges. You were back, but not in your time. Portraits lined the hallway walls now, and this time they weren't empty. Each frame bore a face, some smiling, others solemn, all strangers except one. Your own, hung above the stairwell. You approached it slowly. The brass plaque beneath read, "The Guest Who Returned." Behind you, footsteps descended the stairs. You turned quickly, heart rising into your throat. A woman stood at the landing. The housekeeper, but not the seamstress version, not the silent keeper of mirrors. She was younger here, her mouth intact, her eyes steady. She looked at you and said, "You remembered. That's rare."
You stared at the woman, your pulse hammering in your throat. She wore a gray wool dress, plain and pressed. Her hands were folded neatly in front of her, the one thumb anxiously rubbed over the other. You knew her name before she said it. "Mara," you whispered. She nodded once. "The housekeeper?" Her lips curled slightly, something between a smile and regret. "That's what they called me. I stayed too long, longer than most." Her voice was soft, like pages turning in a quiet room. You stepped off the stairwell. "I saw you! In the mirror world! You helped me!" "No," she said gently. "You helped yourself. I only held the door open." You didn't know what to ask next. Your mind swirled with more questions than time. "What is this place?" you finally asked. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she gestured toward the hall, where golden lamplight now flickered and portraits blinked softly in their frames, as though the house were listening. "This place is memory. It keeps what others try to forget. Those who carry too much, those who run from themselves." "And me?" you asked. Mara's gaze softened. "You were here once before, long ago. You chose to forget, but not all things stay buried." She led you to the study. It was brighter now, the desk no longer dust-covered, the windows open to the moonlight. The ledger still sat there, but its pages were clean, blank, waiting. She slid it toward you. "Most leave without their name. They fade in time. The house stores what they cannot carry." You opened the book. Your name wasn't there anymore. Why? Because you remembered, and you chose to leave whole. You stared at the pen beside the book. Its nib shined with fresh ink. "What happens if I write it again?" you asked. She didn't answer. The house creaked softly, almost affectionately around you. You dipped the pen. You wrote your name. This time, you weren't claiming the house. You were claiming yourself. The moment the final stroke dried, the lights flickered, and the house sighed. A long, low breath of release.
Mara closed the ledger gently, her hands brushing over the leather like one might soothe a restless child. "It's finished," she said. "You can go now." You looked at her, truly looked, and saw that her form had begun to fade at the edges, not in some tragic, ghostly unraveling. No, she was becoming lighter, as though, in helping you remember, a burden had lifted from her shoulders. Perhaps her own story, too, had found an ending. "Will I remember any of this?" you asked. Mara tilted her head, considering. "Pieces," she said. "Maybe in dreams. Maybe when a smell of lavender, or when a door opens that shouldn't." You almost smiled. Almost. Together, you walked down the hall one last time. The portraits along the wall now watched you without malice. They blinked. A few even smiled. You felt no fear anymore. Only weight. And a strange sense of peace. When you reached the front door, the real one this time, oak and brass and warm to the touch, Mara stayed behind. "You won't see me again," she said. You nodded. "Will the house find someone else?" "It always does," she whispered, "but not tonight." And with that, she turned and walked back into the corridor. The door creaked open. You stepped into the cold morning air. Mist
hung over the gravel drive. Your rental car was where you left it, dry, untouched by the storm, no fallen branches, no sign of the night's passage. Birds chirped in the distance. The world had not stopped for your dream. You climbed inside and checked your phone. Full signal, no missed calls, battery at 87%. The GPS blinked to life. Route found, proceed to the highlighted path. You looked once more at the house in the rear-view mirror. It stood still, silent. But the porch lamp flicked once, just a flicker before going dark. You drove. The woods opened up quickly this time, the road clearer than before, as if something had decided to let you go. Trees leaned back, the fog parted, and though you didn't speak aloud, a voice in your chest whispered it for you. Thank you. And perhaps, just perhaps, the house whispered back.
The drive out of the forest felt like waking. Each bend in the road loosened something in your chest, some old knot that had pulled tighter with every step through the house. Now it was coming undone, thread by thread, thought by thought. The light grew warmer, more golden than before. Not the weak gray of storm or dream, but real sunlight filtering through the trees, kissing your skin. You didn't cry, but a kind of grief lingered in your throat. Not sorrow exactly, something softer, something like homesickness for a place that never truly belonged to you, but had known you. You didn't look back again. You couldn't. You weren't sure the house would still be there. You returned to your life, or at least the shape of it. The bed was where it should be. The dishes, the clothes in the hamper. No days had passed, no hours even, but something inside you had changed. You found yourself staring into mirrors longer than you used to, listening for echoes in quiet halls. You no longer rushed through closed doors. You paused at thresholds. You listened to silence. Sometimes at night, just as you were drifting to sleep, you'd smell lavender or hear the soft sound of lace brushing stone. And once, only once, you found a needle on your nightstand, threaded, waiting. You did not touch it.
The days passed quietly. You returned to routines, coffee brewed in silence, the creak of your own home's floors, the comforting rattle of pipes when the heat kicked in. Normal things, but they no longer felt empty. You began to notice the weight in old houses, the hush between footsteps. You'd run your hands along door frames and feel their stories press against your skin. Sometimes at dusk, you'd pause and wonder, what if I'd stayed? What would have become of you if you'd taken the needle to your lips and let your name sink into the wood? But you hadn't. You'd left with your name, with your voice. Still, the house had left something behind. A scar, maybe. Or a key. Not one you held. One inside you. Years passed. And then, one quiet evening, you found something odd in your mailbox. A single envelope. No return address. Thick linen paper. Inside, a page torn from a ledger. At the top, the still house. Beneath it, a list of names, many crossed out, some glowing faintly beneath the ink. At the bottom, yours, fresh, uncrossed. Next to it, a single line handwritten in dark ink. There is always a door. You only have to remember where to knock. You folded the paper, placed it in a drawer, and did not open it again. But at night sometimes, you dream of a house with tall windows, warm firelight, and a door that always opens when it's ready.